1930s for our beloved car companies was hell, and for many of them, it was the end of the road. The 1930s would see brands like Duesenberg, Pierce Arrow, and Stutz vanish from the landscape, leaving behind only a token amount of their efforts left for us to admire. The Great Depression brought the auto industry to its knees, but in the United States, in the early 1940s, things were starting to look up. Sales were slowly recovering, and people were going back to work. Desoto, like most people, would want to forget the Great Depression, and in 1942 would see optimism ahead, even with storm clouds brewing on the horizon. The 1942 Desoto would naturally be made by a brand named, well, Desoto. The marque would get its name after the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto, a man who would gain prominence for leading the first European expeditions through modern states like Mississippi, Georgia, and the like. Desoto would grace the public with advanced features and a bit tame styling for the 1929 model year shortly after its cheaper and more popular cousin Plymouth was introduced. And the brand was an instant hit, having the best intro sales years for a brand that would not be beat for decades. Desoto would make very average mid-price cars, mid-price meaning more expensive than Plymouth, Ford, and Chevy, but cheaper than Cadillac, Lincoln, and Packard. Desoto would make arguably three cars worth mentioning: the disastrous Airflow in the 1930s, and the high-performance, sexy-as-hell adventurer of the 1950s, and of course, the ever-optimistic 1942 model. The 1942 Desoto was the real embodiment of beauty is skin deep. While the car looked like it was from the future, it really was from the past in more ways than one. The car used a standard Chrysler-sourced flathead engine making 115 horsepower, and would have a 3-speed sliding gear transmission. From a technical standpoint, this car was all business as usual. But that's not why this car deserves a video of its own. The car is notable, of course, because the way it looked, and the approach that it had towards how a car should look for this new 1940s decade. Gone were the very tall split grills used by the industry. In its place was a very low mustache-shaped treatment made up of 37 chrome bars that made the car look wide instead of tall. And of course, the concealed headlights. Desoto was not the first brand to use hidden headlights. That honor would go to the absolutely hideous stillborn Cord 810 and 812. I'm just kidding. This thing is gorgeous and everyone should like it. But the Desoto was the first American brand to really mass produce this style. And while the Cord 810 was a desperate attempt for EL Cord to maintain his auto business, the Desoto was a look towards greener pastures, a way of showing the auto industry that cars do not have to look like horseless carriages forever. The light treatment would be known as Airfoil headlights and would operate by a single lever inside the car as opposed to Cord's 2 cranks on each end of the car. And while it's absolutely fair to say that the Cord was the father of Desoto's light treatment, it's more accurate to say that the 1941 Chrysler Thunderbolt and Newport are the fathers. Both were stunning concept cars that were made to show the design prowess of Chrysler, and both were fitted with hidden headlights. I'd love to make a video on these cars, so I won't get too much into it here, but they are some of the best looking late pre-war period cars ever made. The result for the Desoto was a clean, aerodynamic look that Desoto would call, quote, "It's a car with the look of tomorrow, new today, to make your dollars buy more in style." Unlike Desoto's contemporaries with exposed sealed beam bulbs on each end of the car, Desoto would have a very streamlined look. One thing I've noticed with the light covers, as cool as they are, is that it doesn't always seem like they fit right, and for this type of look they really need to. See how this car the lights are off a little bit, leaving a gap, and while others are very flush? I'm not sure if this was a result of poor manufacturing tolerances or time, but the lights have to be set right for this look of the future to work well. But it wasn't just the headlights on the car that were kind of strange. Some other wild features of the car was a cigarette case in the steering wheel. It's the 1940s, you gotta have your smokes, of course. And air conditioning was made available for the first time on a Desoto for 1942, although few seemed interested and it didn't sell that well probably. So things are starting to look pretty well for Desoto. Desoto's looking towards the future, we have a new streamlined look. The car would go into production in August of 1941. It seemed like nothing could get in the way.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
But of course, making the car for the future today is risky business, fraught with risk and uncertainties. On December 7, 1941, Japan would bomb U.S. air bases at Pearl Harbor and other locations throughout the Pacific, and in an instant, the largest industrial power in the world was awakened and really pissed off. Within 2 months of the attacks on America, the auto industry would undergo a change like it had never seen before. For the first time in American history, the lines producing cars would fall silent, and soon new tooling and patterns would be assembled, and tanks and planes and bombs would begin rolling out in numbers unheard of. And while the United States, of course, would win the war and prevail over the tyranny of the Nazis in Japan, the future of automotive styling and the hopes of a peaceful, prosperous 1940s were dashed. The 1942 Desoto would end production in February of 1942, after producing a tiny 24,000 cars. Any hope of the innovative car returning after the war were cut short when the 1946 Desoto was a lightly massaged 1942 model, but with simpler headlights and really an uglier grille. It is a shame that the war had to kill millions of people, let's not forget that. But it's also a shame that the designers making beautiful cars had to pause so that they could make weapons of war. The 1942 Desoto is not the most exciting car ever made, but it is an interesting piece of pre-war trivia that should be remembered.